Welcome to Data Uncovered, our series looking at data, trends, challenges and opportunities in terms of the real estate sector. I'm joined again by Martin Betts of NTrust. Martin, we're looking today at benchmarking and data quality. So let's look at the challenges around this, and let's start with the investors, the landlords, the owners.
We do a number of data audits with significant investors and also actually smaller investors as well. And we see on average about 25% inaccuracy on property and lease data alone. And that is only the data that they've captured. Of that data, of that 25%, actually 40% of the inaccuracies are actually critical dates and rental amounts. So that has a huge impact. Missing critical events, having the wrong rent paid or received from your tenants is costing you money and potentially costing you a huge amount of money moving forward by missing those dates. And this is only on the data that they have actually captured. We're not even looking at the data they haven't captured.
That can have a potentially big impact on investors. But in general, how important is this to investors? What are some of the numbers behind this? What are you seeing there? Why should investors focus on it?
So the recurring billing details are incorrect. So that effectively is either losing them money or they're overcharging their tenants. So that will be audited and that will come back to bite. But again, more importantly, is by missing a critical date, whether that's a break, potentially you can't move that tenant out, and that is going to cost you a potentially huge amount of money. So if you're unaware of the data you're actually utilising, you aren't going to make the correct decisions.
And in terms of the sort of financial monitoring side, the financial data side, I guess, are there other examples here, Martin? What should people be looking at?
We don't just audit property and lease, we audit a number of other things. So from service charge, for example, again, we've done a huge amount of service charge audits. So I'm talking about an average. 1 in 3 leases, service charges are incorrectly set up. So if they're incorrectly set up, they're not going to be recovered correctly. When we've looked across the board of all these audits, $10,000 per annum per lease is being under-recovered. So it's a significant amount of money, which at some point will have to be recovered from the tenant.
I mean, that's interesting to see that from the investor side, but presumably there are also therefore issues from the tenant side as well.
Yes, we've done a large amount of service charge audits with the global occupiers. So the numbers I'm going to give you are based on large organisations, so large retailers, large manufacturers with a significant portfolio. If I look at numbers over the last 3 years on average across just 5 individual corporate occupiers, we have seen that they have been overcharged $27 million in those 3 years. We've audited tenants over a 10-year period. One tenant was charged over $20 million. Now we have evidence that, so they can go back to their individual landlords to recoup that $20 million.
That's potentially a major shock for the landlord. So how is the industry dealing with this at the moment? I mean, is it more of a hidden issue? What's the situation?
If we look at the audits we deal with over service charge, the audits we deal over the property and lease, while I think we've done a significant amount, if you look at the percentage of the marketplace, it's tiny. So this auditing we see isn't happening. So it is a hidden issue because no one is really aware what their data is actually telling them.
How do you see this moving forward? I mean, what's best practice? What would you be advising to both the investment managers and the tenant side in terms of, I suppose, solving this problem?
You do need to audit your data. Just trusting it from source, I think, is a mistake. We've got actual evidence, significant evidence, is just some of the things I've pointed out today, where it's a major issue. So by having ongoing audits is going to alleviate this problem. So of course you need a starting point of an audit, but what we would suggest is audit elements of your data. It doesn't have to be everything, the property lease, maybe the service charge, on a 6-monthly basis. And that will then highlight maybe smaller problems which are easily solved in that period.
And of course, it's interesting to hear you talking about some of these averages, and obviously some will be smaller than others, but in some cases it's quite a significant amount of money, both for the tenant and the investor. So do you see that also as an opportunity for the industry to really move this forward a little bit, Martin? What's your sense of that?
It's a huge opportunity. For the third party, if they're advising or managing that client's property, then they have the ability to put forward audits, to kind of push that agenda to say, look, we want this data to be correct. We want you to gain the benefit of actually having this 100% accurate data. So it's a real opportunity for the third party to push it with their client, and where we can help in that, or other organisations can help in that matter.
When we're looking at these kinds of monthly audits, why is that needed? Is it because the data is shifting, going out of whack? I mean, what's the situation there?
That's a technical term, yeah, out of whack. A common issue we see is you have the property system, say Yardi and MRI, and people will use a modelling system such as Argus. And again, a number of audits we've conducted and ongoing audits, that those two systems, as you put it, are always out of whack. So having those two systems aligned is all important, because the modelling system needs to work on the accurate data, the master data. Getting that initially set up is important, so auditing it from the outset, but then that 6 monthly or quarterly audit is to keep them in line. So what we see is, while the data 6 months ago is fine, we see that there are changes in, say, the Argus data, because users are just manually updating. A common problem is that the square footage of the building is very, very different in the Argus system to what it is, say, in the Yardi system. And also what we see is that the leases that have changed over that, say, 6 month period, they haven't been properly updated within the modelling system. So when they are creating those scenarios, they're working on that old data again. It's an easy problem to solve. It can be solved monthly, or it can be solved quarter or semi-annually. It isn't a tough job, it's really cost effective, and it's a really easy solution which the investor or the occupier can easily take up at any given time.
It's really interesting, I think, to see what you're picking up there from the auditing side, and potentially what that means in terms of the industry, because some of those numbers are quite significant. Really interesting to hear that. Thanks very much for joining us, Martin.
Thank you, Richard.